guys, this is Mel, and I am back to talk about the Winchesters, which had its series premiere on Tuesday, October 11th, 2022 on the CW with episode 101 titled The Pilot. Naturally so, this is, if you don't know, the prequel series to one of my favorite shows, Supernatural. And yeah, I have some mixed feelings about this show going into it. If you haven't already, know about it, I did do a video about it. I'll put a card for it up on screen so you can always check that out to see where my concerns are, where I first heard that this idea was happening. But otherwise, I did want to talk about what I thought about the pilot, what I thought about the show in general. So huge spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the premiere episode already, please go do so first and then come back and see what I have to say about the episode. By the reminders are on screen, so take a moment to remind yourselves of the goals. Just a reminder, quick overview in case this is the first time you're watching any of my videos. This is my first impression reaction of the episode. We'll try to cover a few things, and then we'll go to my favorites, peeves, random questions, what have you. I might mention Supernatural as well, so just a huge heads up about that for spoiler alerts. But otherwise, we'll jump right into it. Also, just a huge note though, I am recording on October 12th, so it's roughly about 24 hours ago since I watched the episode. Couldn't watch it at my normal time of 9 o'clock, or 8 o'clock actually. That was a huge thing that threw me off. 8 o'clock because I work at my work shift ends at 8:30, so I had to wait until 11 o'clock when it aired on the West Coast for me to catch it. So, and then it was too late for me to record, so here I am 24 hours later. So let's get right into it with what happened in this episode. So first off, one thing I really noticed was, well, I actually keep track of this time, is that the show actually had the structure of a teaser in 6 acts, when I know for certain, well, at least I'm 90% certain that Supernatural had a teaser in 5-act structure. I don't know if that's something just like lately all the shows I've been studying just end up being a teaser in 6 acts. Maybe it's the type of genre I always watch, or I'm wondering if there's a shift in the industry in that sense. Not quite sure, but I thought that was pretty interesting. When it really counted the number of acts there was. But anyways, timeline-wise though, interesting though, was that we actually got a date for when this episode actually starts. So it's March 23rd, 1972. It is the day that John returned from the Vietnam War, and it's also the same day that he ran into Mary. I think this episode spans over the course of 3 days at least, since they supposedly entered New Orleans crypt the day after John meets Mary, so presumably March 24th. Also, something that I really like though is kind of the same way that Supernatural started off, because in the pilot episode we automatically know that first off, it was Halloween, and then Jessica dies November 2nd, so we have actual dates to go by. So I really like that they're starting off the series in the same manner, in the sense that we actually have dates to go by. So that's something that's pretty cool there. First scene of the series really takes place in New Orleans, March 1972. A man with a satchel with the initials SC, which I'm assuming is Samuel Campbell, Mary's father. He enters into the cemetery, and he enters into a crypt that has the Men of Letters symbol on the crypt of it. He tries to open it up, kind of Indiana Jones style type of vibe, only for the spider creature trying to chase after him, and it looks like they captured him. It looks like a really massive bug, but that's where the first scene ends, and I believe that's where the title card for the show starts. So really, your cold open, that is usually where we start off with what the murder victim of the week is, kind of a thing. So we're still in that sense. So storyline though, everything's kind of interconnected as pilots go. You don't really want to do too many different storylines to overcrowd you, but I did locate 3 different locations, I guess, which I gotta say is a lot, considering I don't think Supernatural ever covered this much ground in regards to like location. Usually it's wherever Sam and Dean are, and then we know where the case is, and that's where they're gonna go, and then it's always in that vicinity. Here we're actually like 3 different actual locations. So first one being in Lawrence, Kansas, second being in Texas, third one being in New Orleans. So with the first storyline, it's also in order too. So first we're in Kansas, and this is when John returns home from the Vietnam War. We find out that he's following a letter that he got from his father, which leads him to the Men of Letters bunker location in Lawrence. This is also where he runs into Mary and his first encounter with a demon. This leads him all the whole supernatural speech kind of thing. In this bunker, John finds Henry's belongings while Mary gathers the research that her father was meant to gather from this bunker from what he was gathering with Ada Monroe. So then this leads into the second storyline, because the next day after, which is supposedly March 24th, John finds news that Ada Monroe has disappeared from the previous night, and it was in the paper. I find out that her location was in Texas, so both John and Mary go, and they find Samuel's research being mixed up with Ada's things at the bookshop. We also have Carlos and Latika joining them in Texas. This is also where Carlos gives a crash course for John's first exorcism with the same demon who was trying to intercept them in Kansas. So we have that, but then also Latika finds research at the bookshop about a demon trap box or a monster trap box, while John deciphers the coordinates that leads them to New Orleans, where they think Samuel would have been his next stop, because it was in Samuel's handwriting, the coordinates. So that leads us to New Orleans. Whew, I'm out of breath. It's been a while since I've recorded these. But in New Orleans, this is where we come back to that cemetery crypt house that we saw at the beginning of the episode. And with the Men of Letters, we see the half-opened door down to the tunnel, and this is where John and Mary find that monster trap box, kind of hidden as if it's like buried, as if it's like a sacred tomb kind of a thing. But then they get attacked by a creature called a Loogaroo, which appears to be a guard dog left behind them by the Men of Letters to protect this box. Anyways, Mary grabs the box. John ends up killing the Loogaroo by beheading it with a silver dagger, thanks to Carlos getting the silver dagger, and then Mary passing it along to John. Meanwhile, Latika activates the monster trap box to zap the demon that was possessing Ada Monroe, who was attacking Latika and Mary, and trapping it in there. So they have the box, they activate it, there's something inside of it, so now they're trying to figure out what exactly is the purpose of this box. So the last scene of the episode has our group of hunters, John, Mary, Carlos, and Latika, deciding to go to Savannah to follow Samuel's latest lead to the next Men of Letters bunkers, which has more research, supposedly has more research about this creature, or this race of creatures or whatever, known as the Akrida, which is a malevolent force, from what Ada Monroe said, which wants to take over the entirety of human existence. Maybe not human existence, because Ada Monroe also said, like, they wanted to wipe out monsters, creatures, humans. Like, they just wanted to take control, kind of a thing. So there's that, and apparently the Men of Letters were spending centuries trying to keep the Akrida away to stop from their invasion, which is quite something. But also this kind of leads into Dean Winchester's ending outro voiceover with him. See him writing in his journal with the voiceover, and then him driving off with the Impala with one of his classic song picks, and it's just like, okay, that's great. Also, we did hear Dean's voice at the very beginning, right when John actually returned back home to Kansas. So there is that. But let's go right into the characters. It's going to be a bit more to talk about, just because it is the pilot episode. We got introduced to a whole bunch of theoretically new characters, as well as familiar characters as well. So let's go into John Winchester first off. Found out that he's been fighting in the Vietnam War for the last 2 years. He listed illegally by forging Henry's signature. He is also, we do see him having flashbacks, even believing that he's haunted as he grieves for the death of his friend Murph. Really, John Winchester heavily reminds me of Sam, definitely in clothing and mannerism, like season 1 Sam. Even more so when you have him and Mary together, because then you have Mary with the leather jacket, and then you have, sorry about that interruption on my end, but yeah, so John Winchester really reminds me of like season 1 Sam, both in clothing and mannerism, especially when you have him paired up with Mary wearing a leather jacket, and then her driving between the two of them, which really heavily reminds me of Dean. So it's just like kind of crazy nostalgia there in that sense. also their viewpoint about hunting in a way. I mean, yeah, Mary doesn't want to do hunting anymore, but like the fact that she's good compared to John not really know how to hunt, and then Dean's the one that really like goes into it, kind of a thing. But anyways, there's that. Now we go to Mary Campbell. We find out that she's not over the loss of her cousin Maggie, who died a year ago by vampires at the age of 18. We find out that she wants out of the hunter life, and she plans to get out after she finds her father. We hear, if I heard this correctly, she's lived in Lawrence, Kansas for a long time and hasn't heard anything or known about the Men of Letters bunker, and she seems pretty put out over the fact that her father has kept secrets from her and the family, mainly her, because it's always been the two of them working together. So her finding about like his secret mission with Ada Monroe has really gotten to her as well. Then we have Carlos Cervantez. We find out his first hunt was on a ghoul that had killed his family. I don't know if I heard it right, but he had a previous crush on Mary before. He's definitely not in her graces after him flopping and not watching her back on a previous hunt. So that's something there. But he definitely can play the guitar too, from what we can see. We also meet Latika or Lata Desai. We find out that she was saved by Samuel Campbell, and she really excels in research and really wants to continue her training, while Mary is telling her to like get out of the life, like don't 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 jump in, kind of a thing. But she seems to be just as excited with about the idea of hunting like Carlos seems to be. So that's something there. And then we have Ada Monroe. Of course, I know her as Anacostia Quartermain from Motherland Fort Salem, but she is the owner of an occult bookstore who was working with Samuel Campbell to locate other Men of Letter bunkers. She apparently met Henry Winchester once, and she even, at least enough to recognize that there's a resemblance between Henry and John, even saying that they had the similar smiles with each other. But she also said that all the Men of Letters that she knew had disappeared 15 years ago, which does match up with the fact that Henry Eric Winchester has been missing for the last 15 years. And it's only until John got that letter from Henry did he realize that, like, he's no longer with them anymore. Although we don't know who gave the letter to John to begin with. I'm wondering if it's someone we know, like from Supernatural, but we just don't see that exchange happening. So there's that. And then, of course, we have Millie Winchester, which is John's mom. She's the owner of Winchester Garage. It was her dream to own her own garage, just like her own father. And I got the impression that she knew about Henry's connection with the Men of Letters. At least I think that's what her and John were fighting about at the end of the episode, before she tells him that she just wants him to return home instead of hunting. It's a little tricky trying to hear things from the episode when you can't put subtitles on, and you have to put it on a low level because you're watching in a room when someone else is also sleeping. So that's also a bad chance on my part. So there's that. But for tidbits, very quickly, I found it really odd or interesting depending, but there is no mention of Mary's mom, which we know from Supernatural is Deanna Campbell, and she is still alive in 1972. It isn't until 1973 that both her and Samuel are killed due to the Yellow White Demon. Again, we'll talk about that later. Also, another thing though is that Mary calls John Soldier Boy, which makes sense because they met when John was still in uniform when he came home from the Vietnam War. But I also just find it funny because we know Jensen just played Soldier Boy on The Boys, so that was kind of funny. So there's that. But let's move on to the most shocking moment of the episode. For me, I think it has to be the fact that the Men of Letters used Loogaroo to guard one of their crypts. I didn't think they would resort to using creatures to their own benefit. Also makes me think that maybe that location was just not meant to be like a base, like a normal, like they go there regularly kind of thing, you know? Kind of like it's a booby trap of sorts. So there's that. But let's move on to top 3 favorite moments. I had a few. The first main one was just the nostalgia over the whole thing. John saying saving people, hunting things. You know, the infamous quote on Supernatural. Also the fact that another parallel I kind of found was interesting was that in this pilot, Mary got a clue about her father's location, which would lead them to the next hunt. So, like the fact that Ada Monroe tells them that Samuel knew of a location in Savannah. So now Mary plans to go to Savannah to try to follow in her father's tracks to locate him, which is very similar to what happened on Supernatural in the end of the pilot episode, just before Sam and Dean departed and before Jessica died. They found out that John was heading to Blackwater Ridge due to the coordinates left in his journal for Dean to find. So, before the whole mess with Jess at the very end, they were going to follow the coordinates to Blackwater Ridge to see if that's where John was going to meet up with them. It's only then that they realized that John had already left and he's like gone a separate way, you know? So I'm kind of interested to see if it's going to follow the same path in this instance, but it's kind of cool that they use the coordinates to like help find him as another means of a connection point, if you will. So that's something there. And again, like I mentioned before, just having them add the dates to the beginning of the episode, knowing that the very first episode is set on March 23rd, 1972, just like the very first episode of Supernatural took place on October 31st, 2005. So it's just very interesting to have those type of dates to start off, and then hopefully they will continue allowing the dates to appear so that we can keep track of like how long this journey is meant to go. So that's something there. Now, my second favorite as a whole has to be the dynamic between John and Mary. We definitely know a little bit about how they started off on Supernatural. They're supposed to be apparently antagonistic with each other before they ended up falling in love with each other, but it's very interesting to see how very different their viewpoints are in this. But you definitely see the chemistry between the two. I definitely think that so far their casting has been pretty solid between these younger versions of John and Mary. So I'm excited to see where this goes. John definitely is like too uncanny for like Sam, which is kind of funny because like older John and Sam just butted heads like crazy. But anyways, another favorite I really found amusing was Carlos's crass course in demon exorcism for John. How he rushed right into it. It's also a very clever way to explain the rules of how a demon possession actually happens. But it was very interesting to see how like John just got thrown into it, which was kind of funny. But it's also that would be an interesting way to teach that kind of thing. But yeah, we'll talk about that later though. But another thing that I really liked was that you kind of got a very Indiana Jones type of a vibe, especially with the New Orleans crypt moments. It reminded me of Indiana Jones. It also reminded me of like National Treasure, where it's like you have to go on like this really old, abandoned buildings or like formations and like try to unearth a secret of some sort that was buried there long ago. Definitely had those vibes here, which is definitely different from Supernatural for sure. Now let's move on to top 3 peeve moments. Really, the only peeve I have, which is going to tie into my random questions, is that I still don't know if this is meant to be the same John and Mary that we got to know on Supernatural, or if this is meant to be an alternate world version of them that doesn't have it being retconned. Because if you haven't watched the video I originally made about the idea of this prequel series, one big concern I had was the fact that every history bit that we knew about John and Mary, especially about like how they met, since so much of it was established on Supernatural, a huge worry I had was the fact that that was going to be all discarded and changed during this prequel in a way that like everything would be retconned, because like as you know, we know what happens in 1973, we know what happens in 1978. We apparently John never even knew what happened to his father until after he had died. So it's like there's so many different things that we already know in Supernatural, and they would have to be things that come up on the Winchesters if it is the same John and Mary that we are meeting, or if this ends up being a different version of John and Mary from like a different world, then like all bets are off. You could do whatever you want with them. And then it kind of also shows that they were always destined to meet, because as Cupid said, they are soulmates. So that's a peeve there where I don't know exactly where this falls. You know, it's kind of similar with like Superman and Lois, that show, how there was always a doubt of whether or not it was part of the Arrowverse or not, and then it took them 2 seasons to confirm that it's not even on the same Earth. So that is so that's kind of where the situation I am in with this show, which leads to my random questions because now my first question is the version of Dean that we saw at the very end driving off in the Impala, is that the same Dean that we came to know and love on Supernatural? Like, is that Dean up in heaven that's now writing out this story and now driving along Heaven's Road? Or is this an alternate version of Dean who is alive somewhere and telling us his parents' love story, which is the alternate versions of the John and Mary that we already knew from Supernatural? You know what I mean? So it's like I don't even know, because then I'm wondering if this is still supposed to be the John and Mary that we know, aka this is also still supposed to be the Dean that's like still in heaven. Uh, then will we see things matching up? Like, you know how in episode 403 of Supernatural, Dean ended up traveling back in time to 1973 and he ended up selling the Impala to John, to the younger version of John. So I'm wondering, like, are we meant to be seeing that scene kind of replay out itself again on the Winchesters, or would that never happen? Because this is a different John and Mary. Like, you see what I'm getting at here, kind of a thing. So that's going to be a huge question I'm going to always have in each episode until I actually get a definitive answer of which one it is. Another question I have, though, is it just me, or it has been a while. It's been 2 years since Supernatural aired, but is the version of the bunker that we saw today meant to be the same bunker that we are familiar with on Supernatural? Because if I'm not mistaken, isn't that bunker also located in Lawrence, Kansas? And like, was it just looking like a different section of the bunker that we never saw, or is this meant to be a completely different one that's in Lawrence? But then that would mean that there's two Men of Letters bunkers in very close proximity to each other. I don't think they would do that for secret headquarter bases. So I'm just wondering, like, what was the deal with that? You know, so that's something there. And another question, again, since it's been so long since I've seen Supernatural, but did demons have an echoed voice when they were speaking from their host's body, or would they just still sound like the host, and then the only difference you would know if they were a demon or not was just their mannerisms and if they flashed the black eyes, right? The voice still sounded as if they were human, right? Except with Ada Monroe and the other two people that the demon possessed, you got this like echoed reverberation off of the voice as if there was this demonic tone to it. So I'm wondering, like, did that happen on Supernatural? I really can't remember. It's making me want to go back to season 1 just to see how like they portrayed Yellow White Demon and Meg, and like how they portrayed the speaking of that, you know? So because I don't think so, because then it would have been too obvious for like when Meg was trying to pretend to be human when around Sam before revealing that she was a demon. She still sounded normal, right? But anyways, those are my questions there. But let's move on to predictions very quickly. So based off the promo for episode 102, it looks like they're going to be dealing with zombies while on the road. Not quite sure. It's a lot of smaller things. They definitely have to go on a hunt. John looks more interested in the punching part of it than other aspects of hunting, but zombies seem to be the case. Hopefully they're the same zombies we've dealt with, but again, still wondering if we're on the actual same plane of universe as who we know from Supernatural, but that's always going to be a question. But the synopsis for the episode reads, John and Millie are on different pages about his new interest in hunting, and Ada tries to bridge the gap. Mary follows a trail from her father that points to the disappearance of a teenage boy in Topeka. Meanwhile, Carlos has a heart-to-heart with Mary as Latika dives into her books to identify the monster. Interesting here. At least here there's no reveal of like which kind of creature we're dealing with, except if you watch the promo, but I don't really think it's going to be as simple as zombies. So there's that. interesting to see that Millie's on this, just because if he's on the road, Millie's back in Kansas. That'll be interesting though, for sure. But aside from that, some interesting news though that they revealed. I think New York Comic Con, they revealed that Tom Welling is going to be playing Samuel Campbell, aka Mary's father, and he's supposed to be first appearing in episode 107. So it's a few weeks away. We'll see him as Samuel Winchester or Samuel Campbell. See Samuel and Sam. Oh jeez. So there's that, and also it looks like Gil McKinney is set to return as Henry Winchester. It's at least going to be in episode 2 or episode 3 because he's already included as an episode count on IMDb for his appearance. So that'll be interesting. I'm pretty sure I heard his voice when they were reading out Henry's letter when Millie was reading it. So I think it was his voice, and maybe that's why they counted it. But it'd be really interesting to see how they bring Henry back, because again, he's supposed to be missing, and if it is set in the Supernatural's version of history, Henry did die when he time traveled forward into like 2012. So it'll be interesting to see how they would bring him back and in what way. Is it by a flashback? Is he actually physically going to be present in 1972? I don't know, but I'm excited to see that familiar face again. But otherwise, guys, what did you guys think about the series premiere? What did you guys like about it? What do you think will happen next? Definitely excited to see where they go. I think it's until they answer that question of whether or not this is supposed to be the same the same John and Mary from Supernatural versus them being alternate versions of them. I think I'm always gonna have that question. I'm always gonna be tuning in to try to figure out that answer. But yeah, I'm definitely interested to see what this Akrida is all about. It definitely has to be something that gets handled before 2005 on Supernatural, unless they actually do have an alternate worlds. Then there's like you can do anything about it. But it will be interesting to hear more on that. But yeah, I'm all good though. But guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Love to hear your thoughts, theories, opinions about this series premiere. It's been a while since I've done a recap. I'm probably out of breath because it's been a while. My throat's not used to it anymore. But I hope you guys tune back in next week to hear what I have to say about the next episode. Until then, guys, this is Mel. Wish you all a great day, great week wherever you are. Please stay safe and have fun. Bye.